The Police Federation is concerned that patriotic, right-wing, decent British people are being pushed out of the police deliberately. Now, this has been a problem that's gone on for some time. West Yorkshire Police famously banned white British applicants in what I thought was one of the most unbelievably racist policies. We also know the way that Ian Blair cleared out all the proper coppers from the Metropolitan Police. But now, I've been watching Trigonometry and they've been talking about the fact that 10,000 police officers who are experienced, knowledgeable, right-wing, patriotic are now on the verge of resigning. That is out of a total police service or total police force of 140. I'm going to tell you what has gone so badly wrong in policing. Okay, thank you so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all of my videos as soon as they are released. And this, of course, is the Andre Walker channel. Okay, so there has been a gradual process, hasn't there? I really hate to sort of talk about the whole Stephen Lawrence thing. And the reason is because, I mean, I was about to say tragic murder, the disgraceful murder of Stephen Lawrence and the appalling police investigation afterwards. You know, the police defend themselves by saying they were useless, and they are criticised by people saying they were malicious. But either way, whatever happened with Stephen Lawrence was really disgraceful. We don't know the full story, and we probably never will, but I think the general consensus is that a gang of drug dealers believed that Stephen Lawrence and his friend had encroached on their patch. They hadn't, they were just getting a bus. And of course that led to him being killed. But that was the start of a process whereby the police slowly but surely have been taken over by the politically correct left. Now, it's all perfectly well and good, you know, being an HRE person or being a diversity person or whatever. But when you're running out with a taser and a truncheon, probably not a truncheon anymore, fighting against people who are the worst of our society, it's really, really hard to follow the policies of a diversity training day. And what I mean to say by that is, if somebody's coming to thump you, you're going to have to thump them back. But, of course, now what happens is we're not allowed to be proper police, or they're not allowed to be proper police. And so many of the ordinary police are starting to walk out, not in disgust, but they find it impossible. Let me give you a classic example of this. The case of Jean-Charles de Menezes. If you were going to blame anybody for the situation with Jean-Charles de Menezes, who was shot on the London Underground train, you would have to blame Cressida Dick, who, remember, was promoted for her role in it, but also the Metropolitan Police Authority. I was vaguely an advisor to the Metropolitan Police Authority at the time that Operation Krytos came in. When I say I was vaguely, a number of members of the Metropolitan Police Authority, the governing body, were also members of the London Assembly. So I was an advisor to a group of London Assembly members, specifically the Conservative group, but not in their capacity as Metropolitan Police Authority members. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But we discussed for quite some time Operation Krytos, which had come in from the Israelis, which basically said that if somebody had a suicide vest on, then if they were confirmed to be a T, if they were confirmed to have the vest, then under Operation Krytos, they would not be told to put their hands up, they would be immediately shot. Now, is that the right thing to do? I don't know, but it was a democratic decision and it was done on the best advice that we had at the time. And of course we knew, you may hate saying this, we knew of course that might end up in a situation whereby somebody, an innocent person, you know, ended up in the position that Jean-Charles de Menezes ended up. What was ludicrous about that was the way that the firearms officers themselves were blamed for it all. That was ludicrous. Cressida Dick acted on the best information she had. She may have mucked it up. She probably didn't. She acted on the intelligence she had, and then those police officers went down the escalator and did what they'd been told to do. But they're not responsible at all. That's a particularly egregious example, isn't it, of somebody who ends up in a position where the policy lands them in hot water and they get investigated and get into trouble over it. In that case, the firearms officers were considering all handing in their weapons. Just to explain, because of the psychological evaluation of police firearms officers, they can resign and stay as police officers. They just hand back their guns if they don't feel able to do it. They're the only people who can basically go on strike within the police, although the word strike is a legally difficult thing. But that was the most egregious example of a bigger thing that's happening, which is this. When police officers attempt to do their job, it will hit the media. I mean, if you look at that case at Manchester Airport where the police officers are having to go at those blokes, well, you think to yourself, okay, this 30-second clip shows the police randomly committing a racist attack. But of course, it's been edited, and the previous 5 minutes are not being shown. When they did, it was fairly obvious the police were in the right. So what happens time and time again is the police leadership hang out their own officers to dry. And of course, none of them want to be there as a result. Similarly, because there's been a recruitment crisis, which is caused by two things, the number of people leaving and the fact that Theresa May cut police numbers to the bone, they've brought in substandard people. And in the case of West Yorkshire Police, they were literally picking people based on the colour of their skin, which I just think is complete madness. Although it has happened before, by the way. The police service of Northern Ireland have a rule whereby for every Protestant they allow in, for every other person of any description they let in, they've got to let in one Catholic to try and even out the numbers. Although that was for a very specific situation related to the Northern Ireland peace process. So maybe that was a good thing to do. But where are we now? Well, where we are is very simply this. The quality of our policing is taking a nosedive. The ludicrous situation where police are supposed to be policing what you say and what you think rather than actually dealing with crime has been a disaster. The police officers concerned don't want to do it. So we're losing the experience, we're losing the knowledge, and critically, we're losing public trust and public confidence. And I think what happens is then the police lean into that, because actually, if what you're doing is recruiting sort of angry LGBT activists or angry, racial diversity activists as police constables, then they're going to be pretty nasty out and about. And of course, that's going to be detected. I also know, because a viewer of my TV show got in touch with me to say that he had applied to the Essex Police, and they were very clear that nobody who was a Reform Party supporter would be allowed in Essex Police, which I think is remarkable. Essex Police, of course, deny that. And then we got to the situation with the Met a few years ago where they put adverts on Google saying, would you like to report a right-wing extremist? I was one of, I think, about 1,000 people who reported themselves as right-wing extremists. And the reason is because there was no section to report an Islamist extremist or indeed a left-wing extremist. And what it turned out to be was that they were just more interested in cataloguing the political views of people rather than genuinely investigating any threat to the public. Now, at the end of the day, if they are saying that every single right-winger, every single patriot is a danger to national security, then certainly not going to allow them into the police. You may, by the way, want to know exactly what I said. I phoned up and I said, hello, I think I might be a right-wing extremist. I'd like to report myself. And they said, have you ever been a member of or voted for the British National Party? And I said, no. And they said, are you a racist? And I said, no. And they said, well, in that case, you're probably not a right-wing extremist. And that was the end of the conversation. They didn't put me down. But I'll say this. The Stephen Lawrence thing led to the police slowly but surely being taken over by social workers. Policing in Britain is something that we're extremely concerned about. And you have these neurotic conversations about the way that ID cards might be brought in or might not be brought in. And it's to do with policing. We have had a huge benefit in this country of having an absolutely brilliant police service without fear or favour. And actually people who literally, not figuratively, literally run into machine gun fire when everybody else is running away. And I think that we have to remember the value of that. Now, the political left will always try and hijack anything in order to be an organ for the change of society. We saw today His Majesty the King out with a memorial to LGBTQ members of the armed forces. I, in a sense, oppose that memorial. And I'll tell you why. Because it wasn't a memorial to those who died. It was just a memorial to gayness. And I think that that is the wrong thing. The army ought to be, or the military ought to be, there in order to serve the country and be blind to all these things. I wouldn't necessarily section people out. But I mean, if it was a memorial to a gay person who had done something particularly meritorious, then great. But just because give them a memorial just for being gay, I don't agree with. Similarly, I don't agree with the way that that we are putting quotas into things. I don't think the army or the military should be an organ of change. I don't think the police should be either. I think what you have to do is get the best people for the job. And what I can see now is that the left do not like the perception that police are conservative. Although you have to remember, when you say conservative, it's small c conservative. I mean, you know, people on the right of the Labour Party are pretty hang 'em and flog 'em when it comes to law and order. But they don't like that. And they think that the priority should not be solving crime, should not be clearing our streets. It should be about promoting diversity, and it should be about sending around the police to bully people who the political left disagree with. That is a disaster and will turn our police into what most people across the world would recognise as the police, a group of thugs who represent the state in order to force you to do whatever the state wants to do. That is not what we want in the British police. Please do subscribe and hit the bell notification icon below. And also, I just want to say to you, if you all do that, we'll get to 200,000 subscribers, which would be phenomenal. Till next time, goodbye.